Yippee-ki-pee!
Hey guys, and welcome to the second part of Hearthstone Nerfs and Buffs. In this part, we will cover class-specific changes for the classes we did not cover in the first video, namely the Hunter, Warrior, Druid, and Priest. If you want to see the changes to the other classes first, check out our prior video, and for all neutral card changes, stay tuned for the final video in this series.
Rexa!
Unleash the Hounds has undergone 3 changes since closed beta, more than any other card in the game so far. This card is particularly interesting because it demonstrates the struggle Blizzard historically had with balancing the charge mechanic in the game. Nerf it a lot and it is unplayable, but buff it a little and it can break the game. Back in closed beta, Unleash the Hounds used to be part of an OTK Hunter deck that included Timberwolves, Young Dragonhawks, Stone Tusk Boars, and Starving Buzzards. We know it sounds absurd today, but that deck list was broken back then. The idea was simple: just play all these cheap minions when you have enough mana, and then play the 1 mana Unleash the Hounds to give them all charge and +1 attack and smork the face. Obviously, giving all minions charge and +1 attack for 1 mana is absurdly broken, so they changed the card to summon a Hound for every enemy minion instead, and increased the cost to 4. At 4 mana, the card became mediocre and saw no play, so they buffed its cost back to 2. But then it started dominating the meta again, so finally they settled on the sweet spot of 3 mana. Another card that saw a couple of changes is Unleash the Hound's best friend, Starving Buzzard. Starving Buzzard used to be a 2/2 for 2 mana, but for 2 health, Blizzard felt it was too strong as a card draw engine, so they changed its health to 1 instead. The thinking behind the change was that a 2/1 for 2 mana is much weaker against Mage, Rogue, and Druid, all classes that can simply kill it on turn 2 using their hero power. During Naxxramas, the Aggro Undertaker Hunter deck was too dominant, having a win rate of around 60% on ladder, the highest win rate of all time according to Blizzard. A big reason for that, besides the broken Undertaker card, was the ability of the Hunter to refill their hand when they start running out of steam with the Starving Buzzard and Unleash the Hounds combo. The devs decided to nerf the card by increasing its cost to 5 mana and changing its stats to 3/2 instead. At 5 mana, the card is beyond dead at this point. Speaking of Naxxramas, secrets were a thing back then due to this innocent looking but severely OP card. In a secret heavy meta, getting rid of the enemy's secrets and drawing a card for 1 mana was very strong for a class that already dominated, so Flare was nerfed by increasing its cost from 1 to 2. After the nerf, Flare has become more of a tech card against secret heavy metas like the Christmas tree meta of Mysterious Challenger.
Oh, play it, play it, play it! Come on, play it! Yes! Oh, good thing! Oh, four secrets! Oh my god!
The next 2 changes are for cards that used to benefit from the enemy's board state as well as your own. Scavenging Hyena used to grow if either your beasts or the enemy's beasts died, whereas Eaglehorn Bow used to gain 1 durability whenever any secret was revealed, yours or your enemy's. Although Scavenging Hyena is never played in the competitive scene, Eaglehorn Bow is still a very solid weapon that regularly sees play. Hunter's Mark has also undergone a couple of changes. In closed beta, it used to reduce the enemy minion's health to 1 only until the end of the turn. It was buffed by removing the 1 turn only effect. During the introduction to Standard, the devs thought that a 0 mana removal spell in the Classic set was too efficient, so they increased its cost to 1. Even at 1 mana, it is still one of the most efficient removal spells in the game and sees regular play. The next change is undocumented, but still very interesting. Before the change, Bestial Wrath could target both your beasts and enemy beasts instead of only targeting yours. Why would you want to give an enemy beast immunity, you might ask? Well, the way Hearthstone works, a minion with both immune and taunt will not act as a taunt, so prior to the change, Bestial Wrath could be used to effectively remove taunt from an enemy beast until the end of the turn, which is obviously not the intended purpose of the card. The final and most recent change happened during the One Night in Karazhan meta. Call of the Wild was way too strong for 8 mana, so Blizzard decided to raise the cost of the card to 9. Even for 9 mana, the card is still not bad and would probably see some play if the current meta was slower and the Hunter was a viable class.
Anduin!
There used to be an old priest card called Fade in closed beta which gave your minions taunt and drew a card. Giving minions taunt for 2 mana is not that strong of an effect, especially for a class that does not traditionally have board control. That's why the spell was replaced by the now iconic Shadow Word Death. Another pre-spell that was replaced in closed beta was Greater Heal. Greater Heal used to be a 2 mana pre-spell that restored 2 health to a character for each card in your opponent's hand. The card seemed to be a fringe tech card against control-type decks that have lots of cards in their hand, like Handlock. Blizzard has released in later expansions several cards that get a benefit if your opponent has lots of cards in hand, like Clockwork Giant, Goblin Sapper, and Leather-clad Hog Leader, but the mechanic proved too unreliable to see any play. Greater Heal had some interesting synergies with Alkanized Soul Priest, where it can target the enemy hero and dish out lots of damage. The card has been replaced by the more consistent Holy Fire, which still shares the same artwork of Greater Heal.
What the shit just happened?
Lightspawn was buffed from a 0-4 to a 0-5. For 4 health, it was worse than other 4-4 mana drops because unlike a card like Ogre Magi, for example, its attack goes down when attacked by a minion. Ogre Magi can trade into 2/2/3 minions and kill them both, whereas Lightspawn will trade into the first 2/3 and kill it, but then its stats would go down to 2/2, so the next 2/3 can kill it and stay alive. For 5/5, it saw some play in the early days of the game where it had some fun interactions with Divine Spirit and Power Word Shield. Power Word Shield used to give a minion +3 health and now gives them +2 health and a card instead. The new version of the card is much better because drawing a card costs much more than an extra stat of health. Also, with no friendly minions in play, the new version can still be used on an opponent's minion to draw a card, whereas the old version was a dead card in your hand. Cabal Shadow Priest used to have a 3/4 body rather than a 4/5 body. As a 3/4 minion, it was too weak as a 6 mana card, but as a 4/5 minion, you can still play it without the battle cry and not feel too bad about it. Another iconic priest card that was buffed was Northshire Cleric, whose mana cost was reduced from 2 to 1. For 2 mana, the card was too slow to see a lot of play, but for 1 mana, it is one of the best 1-drops in the game, and the main card draw engine for priest. The last priest change was nerfing Mind Control from 8 to 10 mana. For 8 mana, it was too frustrating to play against, and in that particular meta where Ragnaros is top dog, not only did Mind Control steal Ragnaros on the turn he was played, it also used his end of turn effect to deal 8 damage to the player who played him in the first place.
Garrosh!
The charge spell was nerfed 2 times in Hearthstone's history. In the first nerf, it was upped from 0 to 3 mana, and its effect was changed to give the minion +2 attack as well as charge. For 0 mana, charge was too efficient of a spell, and it could enable some nasty combos, so upping it to 3 mana seemed to keep it in check for a while. It wasn't until the Karazhan meta that an OTK deck based on charge started to emerge, and that was the Raging Worgen Warrior OTK deck. The idea was to have lots of card draws and removal until you got all your combo pieces, which included Raging Worgen, Inner Rage, Charge, and Faceless Manipulator. Playing Raging Worgen with Inner Rage and Charge dealt 16 damage, and with Faceless Manipulator, it doubled to 32 damage. The deck was good but not a tier 1 deck, and it required a lot of skill to maneuver. Still, Blizzard did not like the idea of dealing 32 damage from an empty board in one turn, so it changed Charge into a 1 mana spell that grants a friendly minion the ability to only attack other minions. Without the ability to smork the face, the card lost its identity. Another charge card that saw a couple of iterations was Warsong Commander. Back in beta, it gave every minion charge, which enabled for some broken OTK combos like the OTK Warrior Molten Giant combo deck. In that deck, you waited till your health went down to 10, so you can play your 2 Molten Giants for free, and then use Warsong Commander to give them charge. You could even add Faceless Manipulators or Youthful Brewmasters to get in more damage. The card was nerfed to give minions with 3 or less attack charge. But then came the Grim Patron Warrior, and he dominated the meta, especially in the competitive Hearthstone scene, so Blizzard decided once more to nerf the card by changing it this time to give charge minions +1 attack. This is an example of Blizzard going overboard with their nerfs, and pretty much killing the card. It is now worse than Raid Leader, which itself is a mediocre card that never sees play. Cruel Taskmaster in closed beta used to have a 2/1 body. As a 2/1, he died easily to any 1 attack minion or hero power, so he was buffed to a 2/2 instead. Frothing Berserker used to be a 1/4 rather than a 2/4, and with this one extra attack he has become a staple in aggressive or combo warrior decks. Battle Rage used to cost 2 mana and draw a card for every damaged friendly or enemy minion on the board, so it was changed to a 3 mana draw a card for every damaged character, including both heroes. They later changed it back to 2 mana, but it draws cards for friendly characters only, without the enemy minions and hero. Inner Rage was buffed so that its +2 attack effect no longer goes away at the end of the turn, and Commanding Shout's cost was increased to 2 mana, but it now draws you a card as well. The most recent nerf came to Execute, which was a super efficient removal spell for 1 mana and part of the Evergreen Classic set, so its cost was increased to 2 instead. Even at 2 mana, it still sees play in Control Warrior.
Malfurion!
Cenarius used to be 8 mana instead of 9. For 8 mana, he used to provide you with at least 9/12 worth of stats if you summon 2 Treants or give 2 minions +2/+2, with the potential for more stats if more than 2 friendly minions were in play. The stats he provided and his versatility were too much value for his mana cost, so he was increased by 1 mana. Both Wrath and Starfall used to allow you to target the enemy hero, which made the cards extremely powerful. Just imagine that you could also use Wrath to target the enemy hero. It would be like Dark Bomb, but with the flexibility to also draw cards. Also, in a world where Moonfire sees play in an OTK Malygos deck, the Druid would love to have another cheap and efficient burn spell. One interesting change was to Savagery, which used to be a very effective AoE spell. Savagery used to cost 3 mana and dealt damage equal to the hero's attack to all enemy minions. So with Claw, it was a Consecration, and with Bite, it was a Flame Strike. You can see how powerful and versatile that AoE effect was, so it was nerfed to 1 mana deal the hero's attack to a single target. The last 3 changes came during the standard rotation to 3 cards which were auto-includes in pretty much every Druid deck. To keep things fresh, Blizzard wanted players to experiment with new Druid deck types rather than play the same Druid cards in every deck. First was the nerf to Keeper of the Grove. Keeper of the Grove had solid stats and the versatility to silence a minion or deal 2 damage, which made it an auto-include in all Druid decks. After changing its stats from 2/4 to 2/2, the card had too weak of a body for 4 mana to see any competitive play. Second was the change to Force of Nature. The new version of Force of Nature lowered its mana cost by 1, but removed charge and made the summoned Treants permanent. This change was mainly to address the Force of Nature Savage Roar combo, which was a staple of the Tier 1 combo Druid deck since the early days. The final change was to Ancient of Lore. Back in early beta, the card used to heal for 8 instead of 5. Even with the change to make the card heal for 5 instead, it was still too powerful. Drawing 2 cards in Hearthstone at least costs 3 mana if Arcane Intellect is the standard to go by, and a 5/5 body costs about 5 mana. So a 5/5 body that draws 2 cards should cost about 8 mana. Ancient of Lore costs 7, and not only that, but it also gave you the choice to heal for 5 if you needed. And not only that, but when you bundle 2 cards into 1, it is better because it leaves a slot in your deck for another card. So the value that Ancient of Lore provided for 7 mana made it an auto-include in every Druid deck. The card was nerfed to draw 1 card instead of 2, and fell into obscurity.